Why angels and Hindu deities share the same powers and stories. Picture this for a moment. You're sitting in church, hearing about archangels who command heavenly armies, deliver divine messages, and protect humanity from darkness. Now imagine traveling back 3,000 years to ancient India, where people worship devas, celestial warriors who battle demons, carry messages from the Supreme Being, and guard mortals from evil forces. Same job description, different names, different continents. How is that even possible? Here's what blows my mind. The similarities aren't just surface level. We're talking about structural identities that match so perfectly. It's unsettling. Take Michael, the warrior archangel who leads God's armies against Satan. Now look at Indra, the king of Hindu gods, who wields thunderbolts and commands celestial forces against the asuras, literally demons in Hindu cosmology. Both are divine generals. Both fight cosmic battles. Both answer to a higher power. Or consider Gabriel, the messenger who announces sacred births and delivers prophecies. In Hinduism, you've got Narada, the divine sage who travels between realms, delivering messages from Vishnu, announcing destinies, and guiding souls. The parallels are so precise they can't be coincidental. And here's where it gets really interesting. These aren't modern interpretations. These are ancient texts we're talking about. The Rig Veda, one of humanity's oldest religious manuscripts, describes these celestial hierarchies in detail, written down over 3,000 years ago. Around the same time, Jewish tradition was developing its angelology, its understanding of heavenly beings who serve the one God. But Judaism didn't develop in a vacuum. Ancient Israelites weren't isolated in some spiritual bubble. They lived along trade routes that connected the Mediterranean to Mesopotamia, Persia, and, yes, indirectly, to the Indus Valley, where Hinduism was flourishing. Merchants didn't just trade spices and silk, they traded stories, beliefs, spiritual concepts. So what really happened? Did ancient Jewish scholars encounter these Hindu concepts through Persian intermediaries and adapt them into their monotheistic framework? Did they take these powerful intermediate beings, these gods who weren't quite the supreme creator, but weren't exactly human either, and rebrand them as angels to fit their theology? Think about it. Before they were angels serving one God, these entities had their own identities, their own worship, their own temples. Then suddenly, they're reimagined as servants, messengers, warriors for a singular divine authority. That's not evolution, that's transformation. That's deliberate theological restructuring. Drop awakening in the comments if this is making you see your faith from a completely new angle. Hit that like button if you're ready to go deeper, and subscribe, because what I'm about to reveal next will completely change how you understand sacred scripture, how ancient texts prove angels and gods share the same origin story. Let's get into the evidence, because this isn't speculation, this is documented in texts that religious scholars have studied for centuries, but rarely discuss publicly. Open the Book of Enoch, an ancient Jewish text that didn't make it into most Bibles, but was incredibly influential in early Judaism and Christianity. It describes the Watchers, angels who descended to earth, took human wives, and taught forbidden knowledge to humanity. These weren't obedient servants. They had desires, made choices, rebelled against divine order. Sound familiar? Now flip to Hindu scriptures like the Mahabharata and Puranas. You'll find the Gandharvas and Apsaras, celestial beings who descend to earth, fall in love with humans, share divine secrets, and sometimes face consequences for breaking cosmic rules. You'll read about devas who disobey Dharma, who get cursed, who lose their celestial status. The narrative structure is identical, but here's the kicker. Both traditions describe a cosmic rebellion. In Judeo-Christian theology, you've got Lucifer and a third of the angels falling from heaven, waging eternal war against God. In Hindu cosmology, you've got the constant battle between devas and asuras, celestial beings and demons, with some devas actually falling from grace, and some asuras rising to divinity. It's the same cosmic drama with different character names. And the hierarchy? It's practically a carbon copy. Christianity has archangels, regular angels, cherubim, seraphim, all with specific ranks and responsibilities. Hinduism has devas organized under Indra, with specific domains. Agni for fire, Vayu for wind, Varuna for water. Both systems describe a celestial bureaucracy serving ultimate divine authority. Archaeological evidence supports these connections too. When Alexander the Great's armies reached India in 326 BCE, they brought back reports of philosophies and spiritual systems that stunned Greek scholars. Those ideas filtered back through Persia, through the Middle East, influencing Jewish thought during and after the Babylonian exile. This wasn't just possible, it's historically documented. Even the concept of fallen angels teaching humanity forbidden arts, metalworking, cosmetics, astrology, weaponry mirrors the Hindu story of asuras and certain devas sharing divine knowledge with mortals, disrupting the natural order. In both cases, this knowledge transfer is seen as transgression, as breaking boundaries that should separate the divine from the human. So we're not talking about vague similarities. We're talking about matching mythological frameworks, identical narrative arcs, and historical evidence of cultural exchange during the exact period when Jewish angelology was being formalized. Comment Revelation. If you're starting to see how deep this connection really goes, smash that like button and stay with me, because the next part exposes why religious institutions have kept this quiet for so long. What happens when you realize the divine has been speaking through every culture? Here's where everything shifts. Once you see these connections, once you understand that angels and Hindu deities might share common origins, you can't unsee it. And more importantly, you start asking the question that changes everything. What does this mean for my faith? Some people panic at this point. They think acknowledging these parallels somehow diminishes their religion, makes it less special, less true. But that's exactly backwards. Understanding these connections doesn't weaken your faith. It reveals something profound about how the divine communicates with humanity. What if God has always been reaching out to every culture, every civilization, in ways they could understand? What if the same spiritual forces that Jews called angels, Hindus called devas, and other cultures gave other names, because each society needed to frame these experiences within their own worldview? The ancient Hebrews were building strict monotheism in a world full of polytheistic cultures. They couldn't have multiple gods competing for worship that would undermine everything they were trying to establish. So these powerful spiritual beings became angels, servants of the one God, not gods themselves. It was brilliant theological adaptation. Meanwhile, Hinduism had no problem with multiple divine manifestations. Their concept of Brahman, the ultimate reality, allows for countless expressions of the divine. So the same spiritual forces could remain as devas, as aspects of the absolute, without creating theological conflict. But strip away the cultural packaging, and you're left with the same truth. Intermediate spiritual beings exist between humanity and ultimate divinity. They guide us, protect us, challenge us, sometimes even rebel and fall. Every major religious tradition acknowledges this reality, they just describe it differently. This is what religious institutions don't want you to fully grasp, because if you understand that your sacred figures have counterparts in other faiths, you might start seeing those other faiths as valid paths to the same truth. You might realize that spiritual wisdom isn't monopolized by any single tradition. You might stop seeing your religion as the only truth and start seeing it as one expression of universal truth. And that's terrifying for institutional power structures built on exclusivity, on being the one true faith, but it's liberating for you as an individual seeker, because it means you can honor your tradition while respecting others. You can pray to your angels while acknowledging that others connect to the same spiritual forces through different names. This isn't syncretism. This isn't saying all religions are identical. It's recognizing that the divine speaks every human language, appears in every cultural form, and has been guiding all of humanity since the beginning. Type unity. If this understanding resonates with your soul, like this video. If you're feeling that shift in perspective, and subscribe, because we're about to go even deeper into what this means for your spiritual journey. How this ancient mystery unlocks your personal spiritual power today. So after everything we've explored, the connections, the evidence, the historical exchanges, you might be wondering, okay, But what do I actually do with this information? How does knowing that angels and Hindu gods might share origins change anything about my daily spiritual practice? Here's the transformative part. This knowledge breaks down walls. For centuries, religious authorities have told us we must choose Christian or Hindu, monotheist or polytheist, our way or their way. But what if that's a false choice? What if you can honor the angels of your Christian faith while recognizing they're part of a larger spiritual reality that transcends any single tradition? This is about reclaiming your personal spiritual authority. When you understand that divine forces have worked through every culture, you stop needing religious gatekeepers to validate your experiences. You can pray to Archangel Michael and recognize his warrior energy is the same force Hindus invoke through Indra. You can call on Gabriel's guidance and know that divine communication has been humanity's birthright across all cultures. It means when you hear about chakras, meditation techniques from Buddhism, or energy work from pagan traditions, you don't have to reject them as foreign or ungodly. You can explore them knowing that spiritual truth appears in many forms, and your Christian God is big enough to encompass all genuine paths to the divine. This is what true spiritual evolution looks like. Not abandoning your roots, but expanding them. Not rejecting your faith, but deepening it by seeing how it connects to humanity's universal search for the sacred. The angels you've prayed to your whole life don't become less real, they become more real, because you understand they're part of something ancient and universal. And here's the most powerful part. When you stop seeing other faiths as competition and start seeing them as complementary expressions of divine truth, you become unstoppable in your own spiritual journey. You can draw wisdom from Kabbalah, enlightenment practices from Hinduism, mystical insights from Sufism, contemplative prayer from Christianity, all without contradiction, because you know they're different paths up the same mountain. This is the secret they didn't want you to discover, that your spiritual power grows exponentially when you recognize the divine has been speaking to all humanity, always, in every language, through every tradition. So tell me, are you ready to step into this expanded understanding of the sacred? Comment liberated below, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this truth. Because this isn't just information, this is spiritual freedom.